Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on another Friday session with Dashboard Gear. Today, we're going to be talking about a bunch of just miscellaneous topics. We've been doing a series of virtual user groups and different conferences over the last month or so due to the circumstances at large here so we can't meet in person. So we're doing some virtual things. And what I thought I'd do is do a session where I gathered up many of the common questions that we've received during these sessions and kind of go through those. If there are any of you watching live, usually we don't have too many of you, but if you are watching live and you do have any questions, you can put those in the comments here on YouTube and we'll be sure to answer those for you. But barring those, I'm just going to go down the list of some different things that we received and we'll go from there. So if you did happen to attend one of those, we thank you for attending those. And if not, maybe you'll glean a thing or two from this session. So the first question I had was really around implementation of Dashboard Gear. Now, during our sessions, what we did was we covered a lot of just general information about Dashboard Gear, about reporting, about some different tools. And so these questions are going to be kind of all over the board, but I'm going to start with the implementation of Dashboard Gear because I try not to spend too much time on that during those user groups because a lot of those specific groups are for non-Dashboard Gear users. And so I don't want to bore them too much with that. But basically, when we go to implement Dashboard Gear, there are a few things you can do that will help us. One is if you can give it some thought ahead of time as far as what metrics and reports that you need as part of your implementation, because what we do at Dashboard Gear is rather than ask you a bunch of questions about how you want to implement it ahead of time, usually what we'll do is we'll do pretty much an implementation and then say, is this what you had in mind? And the reason we do that is over the course of the years, we've learned that when we ask people what it is that they want, most of the people say, what have you done for everyone else? So instead, what I would say, if you do have some strong feelings about what you want and you can think about that and then give that to us ahead of time, that will help in the process. It's not required by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely helps because during the typical implementation, what we do is it takes us about a week per application to get everything kind of tweaked and installed. We'll sign in, get that installed. Then we have a session with you and say, here, what do you like? What don't you like? So for example, if you're a human resources customer, we will be saying, this is how we derived active employees or termed employees. Now there might be a status or two that we missed, or that maybe you consider leave of absence people active or inactive, and we considered it something else. So we just need to walk through and refine that. So the moral of the story there is the more you can think of that ahead of time and tell us, the better. Not required, but it's there. The other question we get is around pricing of our products. So currently we're offering our products as a subscription model, and we have three primary products to begin with. I won't go through some of our tangent ones, but our three primary products on the HR side, the finance, and the supply chain. Today is August 7th, which is of 2020. I have to say that because I don't know exactly when you'll be watching this on YouTube, but on August 7th, our current subscription pricing is $25,000 for one of those modules for the first year, and then $12,000 for each year after that, with a 3-year commitment in there. So that is our current pricing. And there again, I just don't usually cover that in the user conference, but that's what that is. Now, as far as best practices go, because I got some questions around, how to approach staff learning, implementing a reporting solution and so forth. One of the things that we found is a good method of getting a solid implementation in, besides the initial comment I had around having an idea of what you want to track, is if you have us build out your first few reports, what we tend to do is our consultants we'll use the best practices and kind of get it set up in the best foot forward. We'll get you set up on the first few reports. You'll have some templates that you can work with at that point. So by having us do the initial implementation of, I'll say 10, 12 reports, you'll then be able to use those reports to look at what are the data sources behind it. How do they approach determining what a year-to-date amount is versus a prior year, or how did we set up distribution for certain users in the organization? So the moral of the story there is to have you use us as an initial kind of development team to build out the first few reports to get you going. We've tried some different models as far as doing it side by side and having you do it and it refer to questions. And what we really found is the best is if we do the first few, then you look at those and use those as a review session on how to do that. As far as training goes, there are some classes and things you can do, but the reality is for your team, if we give you a little bit of an overview, the best way to go about it is just start getting your hands dirty and building some of those things out. So usually the classes, there's not really a need to go too deep into the classes on building out reports, but more so just taking the time to build some out. The nice thing about building out business intelligence content is most of the time you really can't hurt too much by just trying it. It's more of just learning what works, what doesn't work, and going from there. You're not updating data or anything like that. So that's usually the best model that we have in place for that. Now, one of the mistakes that I heard from quite a few people and that I've seen over and over again is during the implementations, when people go to implement a reporting solution, is they bite off too big of an audience to try to satisfy. And what I mean by that is rather than selecting reports that you're going to distribute to, say, thousands of users right from the get-go, is find one specific solution. Maybe it's capital spend for construction projects that you just want to have to your construction project managers. Pick an area or a particular topic and do that first. I know that's easier said than done in a lot of cases because you have pressure to deliver something to a lot of people. But the more that you can do a focused solution and learn from front to back, how to build the reports, how to deploy the reports, the distribution, the managing of the security. If you can do that in as narrow a swath as possible, you can learn from that from front to back what works. Because more than likely, you're going to learn something that you need to iterate on or change a little bit. And if you've done too large of a swath of people, you have a lot bigger moving target to deal with. So those are in play. The next question I wrote down here was around cloud implementations. It's kind of a newer issue with, I'll say, in business intelligence, in that you have implementations of many applications up in the cloud. We work a lot with Infor and Kronos customers, and both of those have a shift towards the cloud. And as you're implementing data up in the cloud, those cloud vendors have a big incentive to try to keep you up in their cloud as much as possible, because that's how they can add on additional products and so forth to that. What I would say to that is, at this point, what you'll want to do is make a decision to take the data out of those in some cases. Now, it doesn't mean not to put it in the cloud, but maybe put it into an implementation in the cloud that you have control of. Maybe either an Amazon Web Service or an Azure SQL instance somewhere that you'll move the data to. The reason I say that is most of the time you'll want to combine that data with other things or do something with it. If you keep it all within those application vendors, what happens is it tends to get kind of locked up there, and you have less control over, how to use it and so forth and get at it. So I still am a proponent now of saying, take that data, use their tools to get at the data, but put that into an independent data warehouse or data mart. And that I'm a little bit biased on that, and that's what Dashboard Gear does, is take the data out of those systems, put it into a optimized data mart, data warehouse. But at least from what we've seen, it gives you the most flexibility to do that. if you're doing things like integrations with third parties and things like that, if you're grabbing it directly out of the system, you're somewhat limited on the types of APIs and so forth that you can use. So if instead, first we work on getting the data out, once it's out, then you can use kind of best practices and other tools to move the data around in that regard. I got quite a few questions around different types of reporting tools. So whether it be Burst or SQL reporting services and Tableau around, which ones and when to use what. And what I'll say there is the vendors on each of those areas, what they tended to do is do one or two things really good and a few things not so good. And it doesn't really matter the vendor. But what I would say is go into it with the eyes wide open that you're probably going to need at least one person, at least one in your organization that is dedicated to do that type of reporting. Now, for you smaller organizations that you might not need one dedicated per se, but most of the organizations we work with, it gets to the point where you're going to need someone that's your main administrator that understands the nuances of how to configure security or change this or publish that, how to move things from production to test, and so forth. And it's a lot of times they're positioned as tools that you can just kind of implement on the side, and they're really simple to get going. And most of them are, for the most part, simple. But when you have any size at all, you're going to need someone that's able to fine tune that and get into the nitty gritty of administering it, maintaining it, and dealing with it that way. So just go into it knowing you're probably going to need an expert in whatever reporting tool you go with. So if you go with Burst, you're going to need a Burst person. If you go with Tableau, you'll need a Tableau person, SSRS, a SSRS person. It's not something you just kind of assign to a DBA or some analyst on the side. It's something that they will have to kind of get intimately involved with. There can be additional report writers and so forth, but when difficult topics come up, you're going to need that, at least that one expert that you're going to need to turn to. So just going to pause here and just see if any other questions came in or anything. And I am not seeing any new questions come in on the live. So with that, that's what we're going to go with for the questions today. Next week, we're going to get more back into the traditional reporting topics. I'm not sure which one I'm going to go with yet, but it's more than likely going to be a how-to tip inside SQL reporting services for next week. So we're going to go SSRS or SQL reporting services next week. And the week after, we'll probably go to Excel. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you next week.